Hello everyone. Today I'm going to read you The Secret Garden. Chapter 3 Across the Moor. She slept a long time, and when she awakened, Mrs. Medlock had brought a lunch basket at one of the stations, and they had some chickens and cold beef, and bread and butter and some hot tea. The rain seems to be steaming down more heavily than ever, and everybody in the station were wet and glistening waterproof. The guard listened to the lamps and carriage, and Mrs. Medlock cheered up very much over her tea and chicken and beef. She ate a great deal, and afterward fell asleep herself, and Mary sat and stared at her and watched her fine bonnet slip on the one side until she herself fell asleep once more in the corner of the carriage, lulled by the splashing of the rain against the window. It was quite dark when she awakened again. The train had stopped at the station, and Mrs. Medlock was shaking her. "You have had a sleep," she said. "It's time to open your eyes. We're at the Thwaite station, and we've got a long ride before us." Mary stood up and tried to keep her eyes open wide. Mrs. Medlock collected her parcel. The little girl did not want to offer to help her, because in India, native servants always pick it up or carry things, and it seems quite proper that other people should wait on one. The station was a small one, and nobody but themselves seems to be getting out of the train. The station master spoke to Mrs. Medlock in a rough, good-natured way, pronouncing his word in a queer, bold fashion, which Mary found out afterward was Yorkshire. "I see thou's got back," he said, "and thou brought that young und that thee." "Aye, that's her," answered Mrs. Medlock, speaking with a Yorkshire accent herself and jerking her head over her shoulder towards Mary. "How's the missus?" "Well enough. The garret is within. At thy for thee." A brougham stood on the road before the light outside the platform. Mary saw that it was a smart carriage, and that it was a smart footman who helped her in his long waterproof coat. And the waterproof covering of his boat was shining. The footman who helped her, his long waterproof coat and waterproof covering of his hat was shining and dripping with rain, as everything was, the burly station master included. When he shut the door, mounted the box with the coachman, and they drove off, the little girl found herself seated in a comfortably cushioned corner, but she was not inclined to go to sleep again. She sat and looked out the window, curious to see something on the road over which she was being driven to a queer place. Mrs. Medlock had spoken up. She was not at all of the timid child, and she was not exactly frightened, but she felt that there was no knowing that what might happen in the house with 100 rooms nearly all shut out. A house standing on the edge of the moor? "What is a moor?" she said suddenly to Mrs. Medlock. "Look out the window in about 10 minutes, and you will see," the woman answered. "We've got to drive 5 miles across Mrs. Moor before we get to Manor. You won't see much because it's dark at night, but you can see something." Mary asked no more question, but waited in the darkness of the corner keeping her eyes on the window. The carriage lamp cast rays of light a little distance ahead of them, and she caught a glimpse of the things they passes. After they had left the station, they had driven through a tiny village, and she had seen whitewashes, cottage, and lighted public house. Then they had passed the church and a vicarage and a little shop window, or so in the cottage with toys and sweets and odd things set out for sale. Then they were on the high road, and she saw hedges and trees. After that, she seems nothing different for a long time, or at least it seems a long time for her. At last, the horse began to go more slowly, as if they were climbing uphill, and presently there seemed to be no more hedges and no more trees. She could see nothing, in fact, but dense darkness on either side. She leaned forward and pressed her face against the window just as the carriage gave a big jolly. We are on the moor now, sure enough, said Mrs. Medlock. The carriage lamp shed a yellow light on a rough-looking road which seemed to be cut through bushes and low-growing things, which ended in a great expanse of dark, apparently spread out before and around them. A wind was rising and making singular, wide, low, rushing sound. It's not the sea, is it? Said Mary, looking round at her companion. No, not it, answered Mrs. Medlock. Nor it isn't fields nor mountain. It's just miles and miles and miles of wide land that nothing grows on but hazard and gorse and broom, and nothing live on the wild ponies and sheep. I feel as if it might be a sea if there were water on it, said Mary. It sounds like the sea just now. That's the wind blowing through the bushes, Mrs. Medlock said. It's wide, daring enough through places to my mind, though there's plenty that like it, particularly when the hazard in bloom. On and on they drove through the darkness, and through the rain stopped it. The wind rushed by the whistle and made strange sounds. The road went up and down, and several times the carriage passed over the little bridge, beneath which water rushed very fast with a great deal of noise. Mary felt as if she was driving would never come to an end, and that the wide, bleak moor was a wide expanse of black ocean through which she was passing on a trip and dry land. I don't like it, she said to herself. I don't like it. And she pinched in her thin lips more tightly together. The horses were climbing up the hilly piece of road when she first caught the sight of light. Mrs. Medlock saw it was soon as she did, and drew a long sigh of relief. I'm glad to see that bit of light drinking, she exclaimed. It's the light of the large window. We shall get a good cup of tea after a bit at all evening. It was after a bit, as she said, for when the carriage passed through the dark park gate, there was still 2 miles of avenue to drive through the trees, which nearly met overhead. Made it seem still as if they were driving through a long dark vault. They drove out of the vault into a clear space, and stopped before an immensely long but low-built house, which seemed to ramble round a stone court. At first, Mary thought that there were no lights at all the windows, but as she got out of the carriage, she saw that one room in the corner upstairs showed a dual glow. The entrance door was a huge, one made massive, curiously shaped panels and oak and studded with a big iron nails and bound with great iron bars. It was open to an enormous hall. The portraits on the wall and the figures in the suit of army made Mary feel that she did not want to look at them. And she stood in the stone and looked a very small, odd little black figure, and she felt small and lost and odd as she looked. A neat old man stood near Mansever, who opened the door for them. "You are to take her to her room," he said in a husky voice. "He doesn't want to see her. He's going to London every morning." "Very well, Mr. Pitcher," Mrs. Medlock answered. "So long as I know what expected of me, I can manage." "What expected of you, Mrs. Medlock?" "Mr. Pitcher said is that you make sure that he's not disturbed and that he doesn't see what he doesn't want to see." And Mary Lennox was led up in a broad staircase and down in a long corridor and up the short flight of steps and through another corridor and another until the door opened and in the wall, and she found herself in a room with fire in it and the supper on the table. Mrs. Medlock said unceremoniously, "Well, here you are. This room and the next are where you will live, and you must keep to them. Don't forget that." It was the way the Mistress Mary arrived at Mr. Waite's manor, and she had perhaps never quite so contrary in all her life. In the next video, I'm going to read you the 4th chapter. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.